Even though Nick likes to give us a hard time when we mention the Heat is definitely one of the lead stories. There is no doubt about that, despite what one of the founders of this network likes to say, because there are a lot of other news items that are very much important and probably even more pressing. But I can tell you that when you wake up in the middle of the night and you look at the temperature and it is 80 degrees, you know that heat is definitely part of the issue of what is going on in the world and around the world. There is no doubt about that because, like I said, got up, like I said, in the middle of the night and checked the temperature. I think it was like around 12:30 or something like that. And the time and temperature was 80 degrees. I'm going like, okay, it's going to be another 100-degree day in the fine area of Durham, North Carolina, and all along those ways. And definitely that does seem to be what's happening across the nation because the Northeast and the Midwest are set to bake under intense heat this weekend. And they're saying that that will be record heat hitting the Northeast and across the nation. So that is definitely something that is going on. And I think not just here in the United States, but in Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world as well. And looks like former President Trump is facing new charges. A new defendant has been added to new charges against former President Trump in the classified documents case. So that is something that is going on. And I'm sure folks may have thoughts around that, just like they may have thoughts around some of the restructuring of the DeSantis campaign, because they are doing a reboot as they are having donor skepticism and deepening divisions within their own camp. So that is something that I saw in the news that we may get around to having a discussion about as well. So we're going to see what folks have to say about that. And even Tim Scott had jumped into that fray because you do know that at one point there was this whole thing about slavery and something that was going on in that space in the Florida curriculum. And Tim Scott hit DeSantis on the new Florida curriculum, saying that there is no silver lining in slavery, and that the College Board has said that slavery was not beneficial to African Americans. So that's something that's going on with that campaign. And DeSantis takes a swing at Byron Donalds in defense of the curriculum, saying, "Don't stand with Kamala." So that is something that is in the news, and I'm sure we may have some conversation around that as well. And then in some other things, McConnell's office say he will serve through 2024 as the GOP leader. And that is because some folks were wondering about his future and that being in doubt after that health episode and all along those lines. And Musk has responded to McConnell's freezing at a press conference saying that a constitutional amendment is needed. So I'm thinking that Musk is thinking that there needs to be an amendment, maybe around age or something along those lines. But we'll find out what folks have to say about that particular story. And on the other side of the aisle, Hunter Biden is remaining in good standing as a good standing member of the DC bar, despite facing criminal charges. So that is something else that's going on. So it looks like there is criminal charges and things and investigations on both sides of the aisle. And it looks like speaking about confusion, I just mentioned McConnell. Well, apparently Senator Dianne Feinstein appears confused during voting, proud to say aye. So that is something that was going on in a Senate appropriation hearing. And that's something that I'm sure folks will be wondering about. And I'm sure we'll get into some conversations as to whether we need age limitations or not. And Biden will sign an executive order in Maine encouraging the creation of new inventions in Maine. So definitely looks like he's trying to encourage some economic engine development and all in that space. I know he came to North Carolina not that long ago and was having a similar kind of conversation. And like I said about the heat, nearly 200 million people in the U.S. are under heat or flood advisories. And sometimes from disaster can come the desire to get involved in politics. So the mother of the Uvalde victim, or at least one of the mothers, is going to run for mayor in a special election. So that is something that is going on. So the grieving mother has entered the Uvalde mayoral race and vows to honor her daughter with the actions that she'll be taking during this campaign. And in New York City, and maybe Lee Newton Rhodes has heard something about this, a New York City crane has collapsed. 9 civilians and 3 firefighters were injured, and 10th Avenue has reopened to traffic. So that's something that is going on as well. Let me get to some of the world events, and then we'll get in with our conversation with our folks. I did see that definitely Lee Newton Rhodes is here. I think I saw Shaquille, and definitely others might be joining as well. We oftentimes think about executions here in the United States, but they do happen in other parts of the world as well. And Singapore has executed a woman for the first time in nearly 20 years after she was convicted of trafficking 31 grams of heroin. So that is something that is first time in that particular area. And in another part of the world, soldiers in Niger have announced a coup as guards take the president hostage. So that is something that's going on. Army in Niger backs coup as U.S. forces in the country are assessing that particular situation. And there are deepening divisions even in India. Bunkers and sniper rifles deepening sectarian war in India is denting their leaders, Modi's image. So that is something that I'm sure people will be paying attention in the world as well. And Typhoon Doksuri makes landfall in China after bringing deadly landslides to the Philippines. And of course, we do know that the Russia-Ukraine war continues to rage on. The Ukraine has recaptured the Staromarsky village in the southeast, according to Zelensky, and Ukrainian forces are pressing southward and says that it was a strategic village that was recaptured from the Russians. And Putin is saying that Russia is ready to discuss the conflict with Ukraine, but Kyiv refuses. So Putin is promising grain to Africans in a bid to ease its isolation and all along those lines. And Russia and Chinese delegates joined North Korean leader Kim at a parade showing off some of his newest weapons, including a nuclear missile, I believe, as well. So that is definitely some of the things that we are seeing. And the White House advisor, Jake Sullivan, meets the Saudi crown prince. So Biden has dispatched one of his top advisors for talks with the Saudi crown prince in a possible push for a major Israeli deal. So that is something that folks are seeing, and all along those lines. And then in the Swiss area, there is the remains of a climber who went missing in 1986. So that was a long time ago, but it has been recovered on a glacier in the Swiss Alps. And a burning car carrier ship off of the Dutch coast has almost 500 electric cars on it in that way. So that is some of the things that we are seeing in the world. And apparently China's Wang Yang has made his first statement after a reappointment as the foreign minister. So that is something that is going on. They're sending a signal in replacing Qin Gang. So we've got Wang Yi that apparently has replaced Qin Gang. And definitely that is some of the things that are going on. But some folks are saying that this could be making Xi Jinping look weaker and all in that space. And the judge has rejected Hong Kong's bid to ban pro-democracy songs from the internet. So definitely we do know that social media has been in the news, and even in Israel, thousands are protesting in Tel Aviv against the judicial overhaul and all in that way, and police are out in force. But so far they are saying that there are no major disturbances or major troubles. And in the Sudan conflict brings new atrocities to Darfur as the militias kill, rape, and burn homes in that rampages that are in that area and all along those lines. So getting ready to bring in my folks, see what they've got to say about some of the news stories that I brought to folks' attention. And all along those ways, I will get to a couple of things in the crime lane as well. But right now, I'm going to bring in Lee Newton Rhodes. Like I said, I would bring him in. I've got Shaquille with me as well. Got Dr. Dan Worthington, and we've got, of course, to have some reports on Ukraine and Russia, including with his show at 11 o'clock, that as well. So we've also got a, just in terms of other stories, a Wisconsin woman that has been convicted of a gruesome murder, sexual abuse, and the dismember of her former boyfriend. So definitely Taylor Shaw Business's dad says drug, and her husband sent her into a spiral. But the judge has determined that she was competent at the time of the crime and wasn't mentally ill when she committed that very gruesome crime, and all along those lines. And the Michigan school shooter, Ethan Crumbley, recorded manifesto apparently has shocked some of those in the courtroom and all along those lines. So we do have some interesting court cases that are going on as well. But I guess the first question I've got to ask, since we get into some conversations and all along those lines, is do we need to have some age restrictions? Because we've definitely had both the incident with McConnell. We've now heard that Feinstein isn't doing all that well in some of her vote choices and all in that kind of way. But what is our thoughts? Do there need to be some restrictions in that area, as apparently Elon Musk was saying that we might want to do that, and all along those lines? But I'll open up to everybody's discussions, because there is definitely some elderly folks there in office. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but if they are not competent, then that could be an issue. So what are our thoughts? Do we need to have some sort of age limitation?
Well, you have to question, why are voters voting for bricks for office? Just placeholders.
Good question. Like I said, I'm sure that even during the campaign, there might have been questions going on and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to say in that space why folks are voting for the ones that they choose. Sometimes it might be that they have no better choice or anything. I know that even here, and I'm just using Durham as an example, we have two folks that are running for mayor that were involved in a lot of arguments, and they were definitely not being very civil in the arguments. But the one, I think, might have said that he broke up the fight, but the other definitely instigated some of the fight and the argument. But they have jumped into the role of going from city council to wanting to be a higher office of mayor. So sometimes you wonder why people even decide to run. Because I know I was having a conversation, and we were talking with a friend of mine about some folks that are running that we know are not running because they have any shot at winning, but they're running because they want to get their opinion out. And that's just on the local side, but I'm sure that happens on the national, state, and international level as well.
Well, I'll just say in relation to the fight in Durham, obviously from Australia, I don't see an awful lot of news, but just tell Steve Rao to behave himself and stop getting into punch-ons in his new bid.
Well, he's actually in Morrisville, so it's a town over, but I get the idea.
But I will say, look, in relation to the age factor, I think competency is the bigger issue there.
Yes.
And ultimately, this is up to the voters. I mean, personally, I don't think that there should be a rule that says you have to be over 35 to be the president. I mean, if the voters want somebody younger, let the voters get what they want. And if you've got bad candidates that people don't like, then you need to go and lobby your local political party or the local chapter of the Democrats or the Republicans, depending on which side you're on, and say, look, we're not happy with the candidates you're putting forward. Try to do an end run around that by having a constitutional amendment that says we are going to draw an artificial line and say that if you're over a certain age, it doesn't matter whether you're very competent or not. If you're over a certain age, you can no longer run for high office. That really, it should be a decision that's left to the people. Whether we agree with their decisions or not, that should be a decision that's left to the people. I mean, Feinstein, she looks like she's at an age where it's like, sweetheart, you've had a good run in politics. Go and knit. Go and enjoy yourself. Go spend time with your great-grandkids. And that episode of McConnell's, I think they said he had a dizzy spell or something like that. It was certainly uncomfortable to watch. But again, he's had a good run. He's had a lot of time there. And it would be nice to see some new people and some younger people come through the ranks. But ultimately, this is a decision for the voters. It shouldn't be something that government decides by decree.
That makes sense and everything. One of the other things I was wondering is, what are we thinking about? Because right now it looks like Trump is going to be speaking of folks that are in the older age, it looks like Trump's going to be the nominee, no matter what folks think, and all along those lines. And it looks like Biden will be on the other side of the campaign. So it does look like a rematch of the last election. But does this DeSantis rebuild, is it going to work? And what about some of these internal divisions that are going on even among the others that are going for the bid? I mean, definitely Nikki Haley has taken some shots at both Trump and DeSantis. I just gave you the one that Tim Scott has taken. So they are trying to build up their base and get some stronger support. But are we heading to a Trump and Biden rematch, and is this train not going to stop? Are we just?
Well, I think personally, there's a lot that you've asked there. I'll just address a couple of things with Trump.
Right.
He's a very divisive figure. We all know that. There's people like Sasha Starr who absolutely can't stand the guy. There's other people that are perhaps a little bit more affectionate towards him. He remains a very divisive figure. I think that he's got a lot of work that he's going to have to do ahead of him. One of the things that's been very damaging is not just January 6th, but the fact that he never gave a concession speech. He didn't there was no Al Gore moment where he said, look, we're going to fight another day, but for right now, whilst I highly disagree with the Supreme Court's rulings or whatever the process is, we have to respect it. He didn't do that. And so it's very hard for him to say that he's going to unify the country in a way that Biden didn't do. As for DeSantis, you can't run for a presidential election as if you're running Florida. The things that have worked in Florida have been very popular in Florida. His anti-LGBTQ stance really didn't resonate with the voters. His campaign has overspent money, and those donors can't donate anymore. He's let more than a third of his staff go. Dude, I'm not American, but looking from over here, dude, if you can't even manage the finances off your campaign of $20 million, you're expecting the Americans to trust you with a $31 trillion debt and a $21 trillion economy? You couldn't even handle 20 million. So, I think he's probably going to be the spot of bother, and I think that you might see him drop out a lot earlier than people would have expected. As for Biden, look, I think this is going to be a very interesting situation, because if he doesn't run, the Democrats certainly have a good point here with that. If they were to say something like, well, if you think that Joe Biden was too bad in his old age, that his mental faculties started to decline, and he wasn't able to give good speeches, and his behavior was, a little bit out of the ordinary. What's going to happen if you get somebody as venomous and as divisive and as, aggressive as Donald Trump, who's also going to be at that age by the time he finishes his second term, and he doesn't have another term to look forward to? So the Democrats have got a little bit of, I think they've got a few things they can throw back at Trump because of his.
Yeah, good question. Mm-hmm. Do you think Biden is the best that the Democrats can put up? They're basically giving it to him and telling even RFK, get lost.
No, but off the people that are there, I certainly think RFK would be a good president. I think that he certainly has dedication to his country. He gets labelled as the sort of conspiracy theorist and the tinfoil hat wearer, but I do think he would make a good candidate. I think the Democrats really love the idea of Gavin Newsom, but I would say to Gavin Newsom what I'd say to DeSantis. People don't want you to run the country the way that you're going to run, or the way that you have run California. Programs in California that may have worked actually reasonably well, or positions that he's been in that are difficult to deal with. What do you do with the homeless? Do you cut the funding off for the programs? Do you lock them all up and throw them in jail? What are you supposed to do? So it's a difficult position for him to be in anyway. But the Republicans can attack him on that, as in he's going to run the rest of the country that way. So off the declared people and the Democrats, I think you want to get somebody younger, but I think that people probably are going to suggest that it's going to be Biden. It's Biden versus Trump again. So look, that'll be interesting. And I'll just repeat just very quickly, Mark. I will repeat what I said before. If Trump was not to get the nomination, and he for some reason was to be a third party candidate, just putting it out there, imagine a Trump RFK ticket. as a third party. That would be very interesting because they're going to pull all of that MAGA base in from the Republican side. They're going to pull some conservatives, and they're certainly going to pull centre-left people and some of the Democrats that are perhaps unhappy with the more progressives side of Democrats. So, look, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think I've said enough. Lee and Sasha, your thoughts and feelings?
My thoughts are very simple. I think Democrats are just waiting whether Trump will become a nominee from Republican Party. If that's the case, then obviously Biden is going to have a very easy time to defeat Trump and take him to pieces. Now, if Trump is not going to be forerunner, which is difficult to see how, then obviously Democrats would have to put somebody who would be able to fight for the presidency. And at this time, I don't really see any substantial figures among Democrats, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure they have talented people. It's just everything is centered on Joe Biden, which is understandable since he's the president. So the other people who might be very talented and worthwhile to consider, somehow they don't have any visibility at this time. So we'll
Josh?
see. Yeah.
You made a comment about Biden taking Trump to pieces. Can you envision a debate between the two, how that would look?
Well, we don't want to repeat of what we already saw, surely, Lee. That first debate was a disgrace. But I do have a question, though, coming into this election, this next election, 2024, if there was to be another debate. What is Biden going to say when Trump goes after I was going to say Tucker there, goes after Hunter? Obviously, we're seeing a lot of contentiousness in the handling of the case, the deal not going through with the judge, that sort of stuff. That's going to fire up some Republicans. It's certainly going to fire up perhaps some Democrats that are getting tired of what they consider Jacoby, what they consider to be the wokeness of the progressives. I think that you're going to see, a lot of fire if it was those two candidates against each other again.
But
plus, they will have term each, and so they can try and compare notes. And Biden doesn't do a very good job of talking about the achievements that he has made, and he has made some. He has actually had some reasonable achievements, to be fair, but he doesn't do a very good job of messaging them.
Well, the problem is, and Shaq, you're right. That's all really that Trump would go after is Hunter, and he'll claim there's two tiers of justice. That's actually what the GOP is based. That's their whole plan right now, which seems to be coming out of all of their investigations. That's all they're doing is Hunter Biden. But
there's more than Hunter. To be fair,
there is.
There's the southern border. The
bank records and all that. They're tying him back.
So again, bank records. That's Hunter Biden.
No, I get it.
Not.
Yeah, no,
it's not. The recordings are Biden as well. They've got the evidence.
I get Jacoby's point. Those are all Hunter related. I get that. There's the southern border and more.
So again, just to point out, going after Hunter Biden isn't a winning thing, and that's the majority of what the GOP is doing.
Well, that's because it's not just Hunter, Jacoby.
Dan, how many words did Jacoby has to finish?
Yeah, let's finish, Dan.
And don't attack him. Don't go after him.
Yeah. So that is the main point that they're doing based on actually all of their investigations and everything that they're doing. The southern border is a contentious point because that is a big thing it's been a political football for every president, but it always hits the Democrats harder because the GOP is great at messaging on that. Even though under Trump it was bad as well, but yes, it is still there under Biden, and it is growing under Biden because after the pandemic, that's when a lot of more migrants and immigrants started coming back through again. I had to take him to pee. But
take him to pee.
But again,
that's very important.
For example, the economy is actually doing well, but the messaging on the economy doesn't seem to resonate because the selling point is inflation, but the actual counter to the inflation argument is that inflation is there across the board. We have just been able to handle it a lot better than every other nation out there. Because
Yeah, but prices are up in some cases 76%, Jatovi.
It hit
Americans are
everybody.
hurting because of Biden's policy.
No, it hit everybody.
It doesn't really matter.
But that's what I'm saying, Dan.
The reason he's not getting any credit is because the prices have gone up so high that Americans are at the hurt point. They don't really give a shit about what's happening now because they feel it in their pocketbooks. It's sort of like my question. Are you doing better than you did 4 years ago or 2 years ago? The
Yes,
answer
we
is
are actually.
not. No, we're not.
Dan, but the
Because
thing is,
prices
that's my
are high.
point. Listen,
To make a living. The jobs that
Dan,
are available
that's
are
my
paying less
point.
than
Listen, that's my point. People are thinking that they don't care about everything else across the board. Inflation hit everybody globally. And inflation.
And I don't care what happened globally, Jatovi. I care about what happens in
You're making my point, Dan. You're
family,
making my
right?
point.
So let me
You're
come in.
making my point.
Let me come in on this, Jatovi and Dan. So I think one of the issues, though, with inflation is that inflation actually drives up asset prices. So what you actually have both around the world and in the United States, where you have big cities and then more rural areas, is a lot of the asset owners in big cities have actually done very well. They've actually seen an increase in their wealth. They've seen an increase in their asset values, etc. But a lot of people that don't have those sorts of assets, if you don't own a whole apartment complex or a whole, city building in New York, you may not have done so well. And one of the problems is when you look at the headline CPI prices or headline inflation prices, it's an average across the country. But we know that inflation is going to affect different people in different states a little bit differently. So that's certainly going to be a problem. I think for the Democrats, they're going to try and talk about those things. They're not doing a very good job. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to talk about the Supreme Court being potentially stacked against them. They're going to talk about Donald Trump's caustic personality. They're going to talk about his handling of COVID, perhaps, although that one might start backfiring on them in the near future. So those are the main things I think they're talking about. They're also talking about cultural and sociological issues. I think the Republicans, they're going to go after them, whether they're right or wrong, Jatovi. They're going to go after them on the economy. They're going to go after them on things like censorship during COVID. They're going to go after them on the southern border. So those, I think, are going to be the main issues that they're going to talk about.
So Shaq, and I agree about the economy because that's where people. So the upper level, if you notice, yes, the GOP are not hitting him as hard as they have ever been, like when inflation was skyrocketing and all the spending and everything else. They aren't hitting him as hard on that anymore because if it goes back to what we're talking about, how those asset managers or the rich still making a lot more money because the stock market is the highest it's ever been. Matter of fact, if we had gained yesterday, we would have had the longest streak of gains than
that's not a fair yardstick because I remember being on these shows in 2020.
And it's always artificial.
Because people were talking about during the 2020 campaign that the stock market is not an indication of how strong the markets are. So it's not an indicator of how good the economy is. So you can't now flip back and say the stock market.
No, let me finish. I agree the stock market isn't an indicator, but it was when Trump was running. That's all they put out there. And so again, we can't say it wasn't, and just like you can't say it was then and it wasn't now. I can't say it wasn't then and it was now. All I'm pointing out are all these indicators of the economy doing well are there. But I completely agree. Dan is proving my point. And Shaq, you said exactly why it's not resonating with the individuals that are in that those everyday.
Now, look, truthfully, I don't believe either Trump or Biden are competent to run the country at this point. And I think that neither one of them are. Biden, because clearly he's limited in his mental capacity, and Trump, I think, has disqualified himself through his own stupid actions. He kept his damn mouth shut and just was a little smarter about how he went about things. But he's just made things worse and more divisive. But Biden makes things just equally divisive. So I think the best thing for America is to dump both of these candidates
So
and find somebody in pick.
But you know full
better.
well, Dan. You know full well that most Americans agree with you that there should be neither of those two candidates. There should be two people, and that's exactly why you're going to end up with those two candidates, because for some bizarre reason,
Yeah, true.
again,
But I
Hold
know-
on a second. Hold on a second. Because one of the things I was curious about.
they end up with-
No, hold on a second. 'Cause one of the things I was curious about as y'all were talking is, so a large extent, a lot of the campaigns, and this may surprise people that I'm saying this, but I've been saying this for a while, are on both extremes of the political avenue, whether that's the left or the right. Some people would argue that even some of the names that you mentioned, Shaquille, like Gavin Newsom, run a little bit farther to the left than they would like, and definitely some of the Republican candidates, including DeSantis, run further to the right than maybe the country would like. Where are the candidates that are in the middle that can actually win this thing and everything? Because I think that that's where a lot of people are trying to figure out, is there is a middle candidate that can actually win, that is going to draw the folks that maybe aren't like on the AOC side of politics and aren't on the Marjorie Greene side of politics. And
I think the problem, Mark, is that America is not going to produce an Emmanuel Macron, right? And do you want to have a Macron? You know, the centrist idea can be a very difficult one. And remember that if the United States political system was functioning properly, a lot of the things that Americans say they don't like is actually what your system is designed to do. So people talk about the log jams that occur, you know, through Congress. They talk about nothing getting done, the politicians just fighting with each other, etc. But that's how your system's designed. And it's designed, if it's working perfectly and you've got a roughly even number of Democrats and Republicans, it's designed to have this sort of push-pull thing, and you're supposed to have broad consensus in both the House and the Senate to get things through. Unfortunately, we've seen that become a lot more political in the last probably 10 or 15 years. I think it will come back. I think the American political system will come back to a more sort of centrist kind of position. But in order to have a centrist position, you need to have two opposing.
Shaquille, does it even make a difference if there's a centrist position? We have all these federal agencies. They just do workarounds.
well,
That's true.
But they are answerable, Lee. They are answerable.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
Well,
No,
they
they're
are.
not.
They are. And if they you know, it's very interesting that you see. I'll give you one example. You see the Democrats talking about back in 2020, we want to defund the police, you know, etc. And they got a lot of criticism for that. Okay, now you've got the Republicans saying we're going to use the power of the purse to take money away from the Department of Justice and the FBI. Well, that's kind of the same thing as defunding them, isn't it? So it's a kind of a tit for tat type of thing. But the issue is that, unfortunately, these agencies are only answerable when one political side or the other has control over the House. But what should be happening is that these agencies are more answerable, things are more transparent. And for goodness sakes, we need more investigative journalists out there to actually hold some of these agencies to account. That applies to Australia as well. It certainly applies to the UK. We need to see real journalism to actually show some of the problems that's actually occurring.
Or you need Congress to do its job, which they will not do.
So here, I think the answer, well, the question that you're asking about does a centrist even matter?
Mhm.
It's not dealing with more so the actual, hey, this government part or this government entity. No, it's the problem is we become so tribalistic that we're just going to vote for regardless of. We're going to actually only those in the GOP or those Republicans are only going to vote for a Republican.
That's most people. You're right.
Those in the Democrat Party are only going to vote for a Democrat. That's it. They're not even going to think about, hey.
Well, that may not necessarily be the case, Yachovi, I have to say, because people generally are going to vote for what's in their best interest or what they think's in their best interest. So if I can give you an example, it has never been in my best interest. I'm not American, but if I was, it has never been in my best interest to vote for Donald Trump. That's a terrible idea for me. If I was in America, that would be an awful idea for me. His America First program has cost me, even not being American, has cost me many millions of dollars in missed opportunities. Okay. Was it good for America? Well, it was good for some of America, and it wasn't so good for other parts of America. Same thing with the Democrats. Some of their policies are really great. Some of their policies are not so great, depending on who you are and what you're looking for government. And I think you'll tend to find, that what ends up happening is the messaging that gets pushed out is funded by big donors, and you don't know what their interests are.
Well, what I'm saying, and Shaq, how you
Yep.
point out the economy right now, the economy is doing well, but it is hitting more so that top individuals and doing well for those top individuals. And the regular everyday people, that's where a lot of the votes are. And those votes right now are tribalistic. And those votes are, it doesn't matter if, for example, the economy dealing around, well, we'll say even just cultural issues, for example. The cultural side of things, how DeSantis trying to run the country like he's running Florida with a lot of the cultural issues that he's pushing that are against a lot of the LGBTQ, the minority community. And that's why matter of fact, one black fraternity has actually pulled all of their stuff from Florida because of his policies. So there are a lot of black Republicans that do and only will vote for Ron DeSantis, regardless of what he does. There are the log cabin Republicans that will vote for and only for Ron DeSantis if he were the nominee. Even though
Hold on a second.
You seem to keep coming back against say DeSantis or against Republicans, and you keep talking about the Republican Party. The same thing applies with Democrat voters. And let me just say, let me just respond to you. Right. When you say they're going to vote for him regardless of what he does, right? The fact of the matter is that the LGBTQ community is a relatively small community by population size. Obviously they are. That's why they're a minority, right? So if you're not personally affected, if you don't have an LGBTQ person in your family, it's not really affecting you that much, you may not care whether they ban it or not. You might care more about local tax rates, or you might care more about regulation that's affecting your industry. So it's not so much that, and the same thing on the left, you might care more about some things than taxes, depending on what tax bracket you're in. So what I'm saying is it's not that people vote for things regardless of what else is happening. It's that they vote for things based on what's important to them. And the stuff that's not important to them, it's not that they just go, we don't care, but they don't actually care. It's not affecting them.
What I'm saying, and even saying the log cabin Republicans, and yes, it happens on both sides. People look at that letter, and that letter is what's important. If it's a Democrat, Democrats will see that they'll see that R and automatically shut off anything that comes from the person with the R by their name. Anybody in the Republican Party, they'll shut off if they see a D by their name. And it's quick to pick, and it happens on both sides. We're both quick to pick up any conspiracy, any idea that could be a lie or misrepresentation of what that person says if that person's name has a letter beside it. It's just what we do. That's the way our nation is right now because
it's called inherent bias. It's inherent bias.
Exactly. That is there.
But by your reasoning, those votes don't matter. That's why you never see a Republican presidential candidate go up to Alaska to try to win votes because he knows he's got Alaska. He or she knows they've got Alaska, right? So those aren't the votes that matter to the election. The votes that matter are those people who haven't actually decided, who don't have a party affiliation, or who are a registered Democrat or Republican.
If we're talking about a centrist candidate who is sitting with a D by their name, you've just stated that they should not go up to Alaska because we already know those votes.
That's not what I said.
Wait. Let me
I think you
finish.
said just the opposite, Jacoby.
No, let me finish what I'm stating. Can I finish what I'm saying? This will explain. Now, you just said that those votes don't matter because of we know we're not going to, those are already established going to vote for particular parties, correct?
Yeah,
if that party has their name, if there is a centrist candidate who is a Democrat, do you think a centrist candidate who is a Democrat will win Alaska?
No, Jacoby, but we weren't talking. First of all, yes, I do. It's just like I think if there's a centrist Republican, yes, I do. I think that they will get somewhere, but that's not the issue. We were talking about a third party, having a third party instead of having Republicans, Democrats. That's what the conversation was about.
So even if it is a third party, nobody votes for the third party because they don't have the money behind them. And even your centrist candidates, like when Ross Perot tried it, when every third party has tried it, they don't get anywhere. So I'm not talking about a third party.
Sorry, but hang on. Again, that's not true. When the Whigs came to their end and the Democrat Republicans split, and then you had other parties. Well, that's happened all through history. The idea that 200 years later it can't happen again, right. I don't understand that. We have
in
seen
our
the
modern politics. In our modern politics, you can't talk about the Whigs. The Whigs, again, that's 200-300 years. That's not our modern politics.
We have seen a fracturing of political parties.
Leave that a point you want to make.
Fracturing of political parties all over the world. Okay,
Jacoby?
The same conversation that you guys are having in the United States are conversations that are happening elsewhere. And it may well be that out of this, you find stronger third parties coming up. The worldwide trend is that now political parties are winning by forming coalitions with a number of others. So I don't think that it's unbelievable if the deep divisions in the United States continue. I don't think it's unbelievable to see another third party start up and have a large amount of influence.
We'll take this no labels party that's coming up right now that's trying their best to get in. For example, what are people looking at when they're asking about no labels? Who they're trying to run? If they put up somebody,
but they don't have the sort of support. You're correct. They don't have that sort of support. What I'm saying is, don't dismiss the idea that a third party could pop up if they had the right sort of candidates there.
The reason I'm dismissing the idea of a third party is due to our modern history in our political system and the way that our two parties are entrenched. There has been no third party to actually come up in the federal side and win a presidency. If a third party were to actually make it, for example, the Green Party, if they were to really try and get serious and make it, you're going to have to start off local, then go state, and then go federal. You will never, a third party
let's
never.
Talk about the elephant. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The conversation started off with what would happen if Donald Trump did, and we've been having this conversation over the last couple of months. What happens if Donald Trump didn't win for some reason, didn't win the primary with the GOP, and decided to go off on his own as a third-party candidate? When that question was asked a few weeks ago, I said it'd be very interesting if somebody like RFK Jr. was to link up with him. Now, that's an entirely different situation then, because you're going to have that magnet base, you're going to have some of those Democrats. But I get your opinion is that can't happen. Your opinion is that can't happen. I am saying that I think that there may be room for the political system to change a little bit, as it does throughout most democracies. Every few hundred years, there are massive changes. And it's normally in times like this, there's deep division.
If Trump goes off on his own, because if he doesn't lose, because right now he's sitting at 46%, he's basically won the party. And it's always going to stick with him because they're so diehard. It wasn't
the case a few weeks ago when we had the conversation about it.
No, it always has been the case. He's been sitting at 40 and 50% of the Republican Party. He's leading everybody by 30 points. But regardless, if he were to lose and break off, yes, he's going to take part of the Republican Party with him. If RFK were there, RFK is not doing anything in the Democrat Party. Reason being RFK is not doing anything with the Democrat Party is because he's anti-vax, conspiratorial, and plus anti-Semitic. Especially
he's not anti-Semitic.
He's anti-Semitic, but based on what?
He literally just put out that COVID was attacking. It is not. What did he say? It is not designed.
Exactly. You're taking it out of context.
No, it is not. It's not designed to hit Chinese Americans and Jewish people, and it is designed to attack Black people and everybody else. This is what
how's that anti-Semitic? I'd say that's true. How's that anti-Semitic? It's not these Jews are designing it. China is.
To say that somebody created or designed something to protect Jews. It is.
Do you ever heard of sickle cell anemia or Tay-Sachs? You ever heard of Tay-Sachs or sickle cell?
Anti-Semitic to say something.
No, it wasn't anti-Semitic.
I didn't see it that way.
Did you listen to his address to Congress?
Yes, and he even said, well, I didn't say that. They replayed exactly what he said. And
Oh, yeah, the soundbite, but it was in context.
In context, Dan. They played his whole thing in context.
Jacoby, you are taking us down a path which is really kind of irrelevant.
And I'm not trying to go down that path.
If it's actually correct, if it's actually correct, Jacoby, that let's just say that what you're saying is correct, and there's obviously people on the panel that don't agree with your characterization of the man, but let's just say you're correct. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to win over Democrat voters. I'll just remember that people like myself who are classical liberals, we're the sorts of people that don't trust government in the first place. So somebody who's a little bit conspiracy theory like is oftentimes going to, that sort of messaging is going to appeal to them. And just remember, it was only 20 years ago when I was 17, 18 years old, when September 11 occurred, and there was all these conspiracy theories that the government of the United States was involved in it. Now, I don't agree with that. I don't think it happened, but there was certainly an anti-government sentiment as I was becoming an adult. Why would that change now? So RFK, I think to write him off like that is very dangerous. I think
you would have a better argument to say that Trump and Cornel West were partners, because Cornel West appeals more to Democrats than RFK does.
Yes,
RFK
but the whole Cornel West is not going to leave the Democrats. But the Democrats are attacking RFK, and a lot of the people that are
Cornel West has already left.
Cornel West is on the Green Party. Cornel West is running Green Party.
A lot of people who are unhappy with the Democrat Party, who have talked about leaving, have left because they have felt attacked by the Democrats. So I heard what you said about. I heard what you said about Cornel. The question, the conversations about RFK. I think that RFK would actually be a lot more influential over that base. But I'm going to be quiet for a minute. Dan, you wanted to say something?
No, hold on a second. Jacoby, hold on a second, because I definitely want to bring up a conspiracy theory notion, and I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree. And by the way, I will say something that when the 9/11 attack happened, I do remember that conversation, and there were parts of that conversation that made sense as to the designated targets and whether there might have been some conspiracies involved in that from a government standpoint. And I can see some of that argument being legitimate. So along those same lines, there was and this might surprise people that I bring this up, but there was definitely, when Clinton was in office, there was a commerce secretary that was killed under mysterious circumstances. And I'm sure that some of the political people
Ron Brown.
Ron
Yeah,
Brown.
he was shot in the head.
Political people are now going to be looking at what happened recently with the chef that was with Obama. I'm not going to say whether that was a murder or not. That's up to the investigation. But I'm sure that some of the conspiracy theorists will be wondering about that and how it just mysteriously happened in Martha's Vineyard. So is that going to be something that's going to play from a political standpoint? Because some people are going to be like, wait a minute, this is the man's personal chef.
I don't think so, Mark, because when people talk about the Clinton body count, back in the day, they talked about the Kennedy body count. I mean, look, there's a lot of people involved in government. I mean, that's one of the big complaints of people, the liberals like myself, is that government's too big. There's a lot of people in government. There's a lot of people involved in political parties. Of course, there are going to be people that die under mysterious circumstances. There's a lot of people out there. So I don't really think these things ever carry any mainstream weight. And the other thing is that we do have a tendency to become a lot more conspiratorial when we can't readily understand something. So lots of people will say, who really killed JFK? Was the CIA behind that? But nobody really asks that question when it comes to President Reagan. Nobody really asks that question when it comes to Gerald Ford, because those assassination attempts weren't successful, so no conspiracy theory, right? So I think we have a tendency when something, we don't like something, or something is just sudden, or something's not what we're expecting, to sort of go, look, maybe it was, this deep state conspiracy. And it's kind of fun. We have fun with it. We go, oh, yeah, the government's doing this, the government's doing that. But I don't think everyone gets too passionate about it.
Well, you're right on that, because if we don't know it, then we definitely try and throw in a boogeyman to fit it in there.
Well, there's no trust, because there's no trust in our government right now, or very little, because of its own actions, its own choices. I mean, Trump wouldn't have the support that he has, but for the fact that there is a an appearance of a double standard in the justice system. There is an appearance that there is, and
At least an
why-
appearance.
I said appearance, and I know. Well, you told me you have your opinions, I have mine, but that's exactly why he's being supported. It isn't because they feel like he's being mistreated. I don't know whether that's true or not true, but I do think there is a double standard in the DOJ, and the FBI has acted poorly. We know they did, and so the point is that how can Americans? We need to restore the trust in government, and to do that, we have to have people who are trustworthy, have integrity, have virtue, and instead of that, we get all this manipulation, game playing, and corruption on both sides. And
I was just going to ask. My point is always that the GOP is great at messaging. Whose messaging was put out to say that it is a double standard that Trump's actions, or what's going on with Trump? Who put out that double standard? No. Just quick, because I got to get to a point. There's a point.
Okay, Jacoby. I mean, it's sort of obvious for a liberal.
You asked a question. I went to answer it.
The issue.
I mean, it's a simple question. I mean, because there's more to this.
God, I mean,
So
look at the perceptions of most people in the country. I mean, I'm pointing out the obvious, and you're trying to deny the obvious because of your political viewpoint.
I'm asking who sold.
Let me answer. Let me just answer your question for you. In my personal opinion, what's happening, and I think that you might do this by mistake. What's happening is whether people's perception is accurate or not isn't really relevant. It's about whether they feel or think or interpret things a certain way. Now, we know that right-wing media like Fox News and other right-wing media outlets are pushing this narrative that the Department of Justice has had a double standard in its treatment of Trump. You may not agree with that analysis, but there is a big part of America and internationally that feel like there's been a double standard. Whether you agree with it or not, that's their perception.
So, again, my point is that the right wing has sold this double standard idea. Where did they co-opt this idea
But
from?
what difference does it make? That doesn't change Dan's point that that's what the perception is.
No, it does.
It doesn't.
Well, I mean, what's happening is what's
I
happening.
can't even get the point out because you're not
I'm
even
watching
letting me
what's
get to that
happening.
point. I'm
Okay,
asking
cool.
you questions to lead you to a point where I'm
But we
trying
don't
to
want
make.
you to tell me. We don't want you to do
Okay,
that.
so I won't
Just
ask any more questions.
But that's
Shaq, I
not-
won't ask any more questions. So again, the GOP is great at messaging. The GOP co-opted
Yeah,
the
it's not
duality.
GOP
Let me
messaging.
finish, man,
It's
because
what's
you don't want me to
happening.
ask questions. So the GOP actually put out this messaging that there was this double standard of government. Honestly, they put it out to protect Trump because what he's done was incorrect. We can all agree that it was incorrect, and what he did was break the law. So
We don't all agree
they
with
put
that,
out
but
this.
okay.
Let me finish. I'm not asking questions. You told me not to. So what he did,
God,
was-
what an idiot.
what the GOP did was to actually put out this co-opted duality of government. The duality of government they co-opted because in the minority community, we know there is a double standard. We know that minorities actually do receive higher sentencing for the actual same crimes. So there is their true double standard, but this upsets a lot of minorities because they have co-opted this idea that there's this dual government. But what is happening is that actually Trump is benefiting from this rather than actually losing. Because had it been Ilhan Omar, you guys would have been arguing tooth and nail that she should have been thrown in jail. Had it been AOC, you guys would have been arguing. Had it been Cory Booker, you guys would have been arguing. Had it been Obama, it's just because this duality, you guys have the GOP has co-opted that idea.
Oh my gosh! You know, Jacoby, you are totally brainwashed.
It is a fact that there is a actual.
There is a
You
duality,
had plenty
and
of
there
time
is-
there.
I asked you
You had-
questions and then you told me
Toby,
don't
you had
ask me
so much
questions.
time there, and again, what you want to do is you want to try and educate everybody on what the real facts are. It doesn't matter. Dan Worthington's point was that this is what the perception is. You trying to tell us what everything that you've just said, even if it was all true, I agree with you, but even if it was all true, that doesn't change what Dan Worthington said. Dan Worthington said,
I'm not trying to change. I'm not trying to change.
Sasha, I'll let you go.
Hi, Sasha.
Okay, with all due respect, let me remind you that you have not discussed such animal as independent voters. Remember that the Democrats will vote for Democrat, whether it's Biden or Hunter Biden or somebody else Biden, or non-Biden at all, they will vote for it. Okay, so same as Republicans, they will vote for Trump and Trump Jr. and Trump daughter and Trump whoever, son-in-law, whatever it is. Now, independents could be brainwashed, but less likely so. They are watching both the Democratic and Republican media, and they can make up their minds, and they're able to do so. And therefore, this is very important sector. And when you talk about the deterioration of trust in government, okay, the independent voters will not overlook the fact that the previous government under Trump, not only that they lost elections, they denied that they lost election. They came up with all theory how election was stolen. They instigated and almost were successful on January 6th, which will be next.
They weren't even close to being successful on January.
No, they were very close. Why? If
they weren't.
If Mike Pence would follow what Trump was asking him to do, and I still don't understand why he didn't. So if he did, so there would be no election possible. Trump would remain president, and then there would be maybe Nancy Pelosi would become a temporary some.
Well, what would have happened is if Pence would have done what Trump wanted him to do, that would have thrown the election to the House of Representatives.
Right.
And then they would make the decision about whether to appoint alternate electors or not.
Yeah, but that decision would take 2 years to make.
That may not necessarily be the case, Dan. It may actually be referenced back to the judicial branch to determine whether or not Pence had the constitutional right to do that.
That's right. But vice presidents have made that decision in the past, and there have been challenges to electors in the past in previous elections years ago. Now, whether
I did want to say something to you, Dan. That you made a comment earlier about restoring trust in government. I just wanted to say to you, I actually do disagree with you a little bit on that because I'm the old classical liberal that I am. On your money, your Supreme Court, it actually says, in God we trust, not in government we trust. And the United States is relatively unique in this. Your country is very specifically designed so that you don't trust government. There's all these sorts of checks and balances in place within your Constitution, your Bill of Rights, to make sure that you don't trust government. And I think that that's something that every American should remember.
Yep. Amen.
I just want to get something in real quick to Toby, your point. Last election, and I think the next one, a lot of the votes went not for Biden, they were anti-Trump. A lot of votes went for Trump because they were anti-Biden and for whatever reasons. I do think there's a large segment out there that doesn't want any candidate. And if they have somebody who's viable, they will go a third party. They will go anti-Trump and anti. I believe that. I really do.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, I think there's
a lot of people walk away from the Democrats.
Hold on a second. I think a lot of people vote anti whatever their opposite candidate is that is too far to the extreme for them. So I will agree with you on that, Lee, and everything. I don't know that there's enough of that to get the third party success that we are hoping for. And, there can be rising tides and things along those lines. I just think, and I think Jacoby might think the same thing, that it is too far away and that enough things have
historically I think that's true.
The local level to have that happen and everything. Just really quickly, and we can get to this on next week on Monday. I was going to ask Shaquille, and maybe we'll even bring some guests, because the division we're talking about, I also heard what Dan said earlier, because I think there are a lot of people that do care about things that are happening globally as well as nationally and locally and all in that space. And I'm curious to find out from both Shaquille and Steve and others that are of Indian descent, and we can get into this next week, the whole notion of the sectarian politics that is going on in certain parts of the world, because that is kind of what we're talking about in the United States, only it's on the religious line. So that is, I think, impacting.
Well, and that's very dangerous. That's very dangerous, I think, in India, not just because of what's happening in India, but the effect it's having on Indians that are many generations removed from India. I will say, because we haven't talked about it this week, on a Friday morning on our last show, I will wish the best for the family and the fans of Sinead O'Connor, who passed away at a very young age, actually, 55, 56 years of age. She certainly was very involved in political and religious protest type songs and things like that. She's been a very interesting character throughout her life. So,
no doubt.
and Sasha has his Ukrainian show starting for those people that like to find out more information about what's going on.
And thank you, Sasha, for your comments as well. Appreciate it.
Appreciate everybody, and we'll be back on next week. I know we have some guests scheduled for next week as well. I think one may be on Monday or Tuesday, but I will send y'all the email and we'll have their conversations. I think one of them may be coming from the religious world. I think that's the one that I've got scheduled for the 31st, but we'll be getting to those conversations with our guests and with ourselves on future shows. But right now we're going to get out of here and have the Ukrainian-Russia show and all along those lines. But another great show, another great conversation, and look forward to it next week as well.
Except for Shaquille, everybody.